Psi Beta National Honor Society is the 2-year honor society for students at community colleges. Here at Lorain County Community College, we have a chapter in Psi Beta, and we would like to present a discussion today on the Asperger's eponym. There will be a petition for you to sign if you are interested at the end of the presentation. We hope you enjoy this presentation as it hopes to educate you about the Asperger's eponym and autism in general. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy today's presentation.
Before we discuss the nature of Asperger syndrome, we have to first define what autism is, as it falls on the autism spectrum. And the word itself, autism, stems from the Greek word autos, which means self. And according to the APA, it is defined as a complex neurodevelopmental disorder that varies in severity within each individual, ranging from hypo or hyperreactivity to sensory input, or difficulties with initiating or reciprocating in social interactions. And autism tends to be first diagnosed at the ages of 2 to 3.
Asperger's syndrome and autism, what exactly is the difference? So there's a few key differences to be able to distinguish between the two disorders. Asperger's syndrome typically has, or individuals with Asperger's syndrome typically have IQ levels that range from average to above average, whereas an individual with a typical ASD disorder their IQ levels are gonna range from below average to above average. With Asperger's syndrome, there's also not typically a significant language delay, whereas in autism, in an autism spectrum disorder, there's usually a significant language delay. Asperger's is also has been considered high functioning or a less impacted form of autism, and then the level of impact in an ASD disorder ranges from high impact to low impact. Another few distinctions between Asperger's and autism is that individuals with Asperger's have restricted interest. They may seem very socially awkward in conversation, and then they will obsess over one topic during conversation. So what do symptoms of Asperger's look like? They're usually detected pretty early in life. One of the first symptoms is the inability to make eye contact. Especially, children, they won't respond to their name very well. They won't look at you when you call them. They also may have a very flat affect and not be able to show empathy or have any emotion themselves. They're also pretty indifferent to body language and facial expressions. For example, they won't be able to tell that someone's crying means that they're sad. And then again, they show a very restricted interest in certain topics. For example, an individual with Asperger's may only be able to talk to you about space.
So it turns out there is a history behind the term Asperger's, but there's also a history with autism. And the first mention of that term can be traced back to 1911, where it's mentioned by a Swiss psychiatrist by the name of Eugen Bleuler, who uses this term to describe his schizophrenic patients that exhibit symptoms of self-absorption, withdrawal from reality, and complete withdrawal from social interactions. So these tend to be one-on-one or in group settings. During this time, he uses this term as a subcategory of schizophrenia. So it's not necessarily as referred to as autism as its own condition, but rather it's referred to something else, which is childhood schizophrenia. And other clinicians during this time have been using this term in their literature for the past decade or so in their literature. This has been going on for some time until Soviet neurologist Grunya Sukareva caught wind of this trend growing, and she contested with this whole notion of autism being mixed in with schizophrenia, and she challenges this by presenting autism as an isolated category from schizophrenia. And she supports this claim through her examination of six children exhibiting autistic-like traits in her 1926 work. But unfortunately, her idea hasn't been very popularized in the West, but it's more popular in her hometown of Moscow, Russia. And part of this obscurity of her work in the West is largely due to political and language barriers that stunted the popularity of her work. So this ranges from various translations of her name being severely mispronounced to being discriminated against as a Jewish woman in the Soviet Union. Additionally, renowned psychiatrists Dr. Asperger and Dr. Kanner, who are widely known for their works, have been suspected to have read Sugariva's work, but not acknowledging it.
So Hans Asperger was born in 1906 in Vienna, Australia. He called himself a wild reader and said he had many special talents in art, language, history, and classics. A lot of his colleagues agreed with him and thought he was an intelligent man with a lot of special ability, but they also thought he was socially distant and awkward himself, and they wondered if he had the syndrome he was studying. He began working at the Curative Education Clinic in 1932, and a year and a half later became director. During that time, he was known to have far right-wing positions on politics, and he joined the Fatherland Front in 1934, supported the Austro-fascist regime, and also was a secretary for the St. Lucas Guild, which was known for having open attitudes towards Nazi politics. So in 1941, Asperger launched the Vienna Curative Education Clinic with 3 other associates. These men's names were Jeklius, Hamburger, and Gundel. And these 3 men were known for their associations with the Nazi Party. Erwin Jeklius was a director of a concentration camp and sent thousands of individuals to their deaths. And then Hamburger and Gundel were also known for being affiliated with concentration camps, and they were known for their experiments on children that ended up in their deaths as well. So Asperger never formally joined the Nazi Party, but when he was deciding if a child he was assessing had a hopeful case or not, if he judged the child to not be worthy of treatment, he would put them in the hands of either Jeklius, Hamburger, or Gundel that would result in experiments on the child killing them or straight to a concentration camp which killed them. It is believed that Hans Asperger is responsible for the death of hundreds of children, but records were destroyed in an effort to protect his reputation. And there's only 40 documents on record.
So an eponym is a term indicating the name of a person after whom, such as a discovery, an invention, or an institution is named, usually to commemorate the importance of his or her contribution. This is very prevalent in healthcare because a lot of the time remembering someone's name for who they discovered the disease of whatever it is, it's easier to remember than the scientific name. But it's also seen in a lot of buildings at like colleges, in physics, like Newton is a very good example of that. But I just listed a couple of the healthcare ones since we're talking about healthcare, like diseases and stuff. So Hodgkin's lymphoma is a very common one that people know. Alzheimer's is one, Down syndrome, and then Turner syndrome. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the controversy in eponyms because there is a lot of controversy, especially in healthcare, with a lot of the different names for a lot of these diseases, because a lot of diseases were discovered during Nazi Germany and World War II. And because of it, there has been a major push for them like changing the name of a lot of these diseases to try to get rid of like the history behind it. So a lot of them actually originated during the Third Reich. Much like Asperger syndrome, a lot of the medical terms are named after medical professionals that were actually part of the Nazi Party and part of the Third Reich. So I just provide a couple examples. Hans Reiter, who discovered Reiter syndrome, was an extremely avowed supporter of the Nazi Party, and he was the leader of a regime. He was actually the president of the Reich Health Office, and he approved of human experiments in concentration camps, and he was a major supporter of eugenics. So obviously that is a very good example of why there is so much controversy with eponyms, because this person obviously discovered this syndrome for the wrong reason. And because of that, a lot of people are very passionate about changing the name of a lot of different diseases for that reason. So another example I provide is Max Clara. He invented Clara cells, and he made his discovery actually from lung tissue of people that were executed by the Nazis in gas chambers. And he was also part of the Nazi Party. Okay, and then another part of this like controversy is that there's a lot of people that were part of the Nazi Party that also supported eugenics and supported euthanasia. And because of that, that is just another part of this controversy, that people just think that it's very important that we get rid of these names and change them to the actual scientific term, so that we can get rid of the history that is behind a lot of these disorders. So the examples that I provide are Robert Foster Kennedy. He discovered Foster Kennedy syndrome. He called for the killing of the feeble-minded under the age of 5 in 1942 in a journal of one of his actual like scientific research. Another example is Wilhelm His Jr., who discovered the muscle fibers known as the bundle of His. He was an anti-Semite and a Nazi sympathizer who favored war and supported eugenics, and he even made a medical program that murdered 200,000 mentally ill and racially compromised people. So, like, on top of everything else, there are a lot of different people that discovered these diseases that use language like that, and it's obviously very harmful that they choose to use language like that. And because of that, that's why like our group is so passionate about trying to educate people about these diseases, these names, the people that discovered them, and why we should change it to the scientific name so that it's a lot less harmful.
One of the major motivators for Asperger and his colleagues was the German concept of Gemüt. Gemüt does not have a direct translation to the English language, but it can be seen as obedience and conformity, or an individual's connectedness to the system as a whole. It was seen as essential to an individual's worth or value. It can be connected to the eugenics movement. During the eugenics movement, if an individual's traits did not align with the Aryan race, they were considered for elimination. And likewise, during the Nazi era, if an individual did not have Gemüt, they were also considered for elimination or to be sent to concentration camps and killed. Gemütless individuals were seen as worthless psychopaths, and individuals who lacked the ability to connect socially or form bonds had difficulty developing Gemüt. And so therefore, these individuals were also considered for elimination, as they were seen as Gemütless. The justification for this was that it was to benefit the greater good. So that's how Hans Asperger and his colleagues justified sending these children to camps. Gemüt can be linked with Asperger's syndrome because symptoms of Asperger's include social isolation, disconnectedness, and a lack of community connectedness.
which are all seen as Gemüt traits, and this perceived inferiority by Hans Asperger and his colleagues was the reason that they were sent to concentration camps to be tortured and killed. As seen in this photo of a graveyard of victims who were euthanized during the regime, many children with Asperger's syndrome were sent to be killed, and this is why we are so passionate about changing the Asperger's name.
In recent years, malpractices committed by individuals who had made important contributions to historically significant advances prior to more standardized ethical practices being employed have come to light. Given the surfacing of this new information, movements have been developed which aim to contextualize and/or rename the advancements which are associated with these individuals. Our project in particular focuses on changing the Asperger's eponym and was inspired by a petition created by researchers at Penn State-Abington. We hope that in our project we are able to further the effort to disseminate this information as well as further the understanding of Asperger's as an autism spectrum disorder. For those wishing to view or sign the petition, please visit tinyurl.com/APSNewman petition. Individuals will be asked to confirm that they have been made aware of the circumstances surrounding these eponyms and will also be asked for their name, email, and institutional affiliation before signing. For more information or any questions, please contact our faculty advisors at Lorraine County Community College, Professor Jim Jordan and Dr. Faust. Thank you.